The Nintendo Game Boy was an extremely popular handheld system and lasted for many years, as this was the handheld system that we had for pretty much all the way through the late 80s, 90s, and even early into the 2000s, as the original Game Boy just lasted for a long time. And then the Game Boy Color also kind of gave new life to the system as well too, and definitely has a legacy behind it. It's just having a lot of popular games, and was really for a long time the main place to play handheld, any kind of like a handheld game at that time. There were some other attempts to do handheld consoles during that stretch there, but none of them really had the lasting appeal of the Game Boy. I think a lot of it has to do with, well, first of all, the Nintendo IP, right? Like, so you had Mario games, Zelda games on there. And then also because even though the graphics were, well, they weren't bad. I mean, they were roughly around on the level of like the Nintendo Entertainment System. And even though it had black and white or sort of like a green pea color almost screen filter on it, the nice thing about it though was that because it was, I guess, technically a bit underpowered from some of the other competitors out there, it didn't drain the batteries as much. And so that's kind of a big deal, even to this day, when you're playing portably, right? You want good battery power on your system. And so ultimately, the system just blew up and became extremely popular, and is still looked on fondly to this day. And then it ended up getting a new life to also towards the late 90s or so when Pokemon came out, because the Nintendo Game Boy was already kind of starting to feel a little ancient at that time. But then when Pokemon came out, it just extremely made the system even more popular, and they gave it a few more years of life there. And so I will say right now, I am not too familiar with the library of this system. I kind of wanted a Game Boy back when I was a kid. I mean, more realistically, I wanted a Game Gear more since I'm a Sega kid, but I still wouldn't have minded a Game Boy, but just, we weren't able to get it back then. But these games here that I have selected are games that I've either played to some extent or games that I know about that I would be interested in playing. And so that's kind of what this list is here. It's not so much my top 10 ranked in order, but just 10 games that I am somewhat familiar with that I feel are worth your time to check out. But I'd definitely be interested to see what other games were you interested in during this generation. This is sort of a blind spot that I have for when it comes to my overall video game playing experience. I'd be curious to know if there's any other games out there that I should perhaps look into. And just to add a little bit more, I don't have the original Nintendo Game Boy, so what I'm playing these on is on the Embernic RG28XX, which is a cool little device here where it's great for playing a lot of retro games. And I mean, it's pretty powerful. Well, it can actually emulate all the way up to technically the PSP, but I like using this more for some of the older retro games from like around the 8-bit generation to some 16-bit, and also a lot of the retro handhelds as well too. It's really quick, just to bring it out and play it, and fits in your pocket really easily and can be stored away really easily too as well. So it's a nice little device for that. First game I have to show up here is for Kirby's Dream Land. And so this is seems like a fun little platformer here, and I believe, I could be wrong, but I want to say I think this was Kirby's first actual game that came out. And ultimately, this game, or this, I should say, this character would spawn a lot of different games that, in the series, and they've sort of become a Nintendo staple for many years to come going forward. But I believe, yeah, this is the first one, if not one of the earliest games. It's a fun little platformer and definitely worth checking out. Next up is The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. This is a really fun action RPG that I have gone quite a ways into it. This and the remake on the Nintendo Switch as well. And it's classic Zelda games, and it's interesting in where it steers away from some of the classic Zelda tropes, like, it doesn't have Princess Zelda in it, but it still retains the same fun top-down action RPG gameplay with some fun overall map designs and dungeons as well too, and some fun item pickups to help you explore with. And the next game I have here to show is for Batman the video game. And so this is made by Sunsoft and seems like it was released around the time that the pretty excellent Batman game also came out on the Sega Genesis, which basically they're based off of the Tim Burton's movie. Now, the Sega Genesis version was kind of more in line with the aesthetics of the movie, where this one seems to be inspired more by the Nintendo version that came out, also using the Batman license, but it kind of feels like it was going to try to be its own thing, though, like in its own action game, as it seems a little weird using Batman with a gun, but it's still pretty fun, though, from what I've played of it. Next on this list is Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge. And so I'm always a sucker for a good Castlevania game, and from what I understand, this is probably the better one on the Game Boy. The first one seems to be pretty decent, but seems to be plagued by a lot of slowdown. But from what I played of this one, it plays pretty smooth and has a classic Castlevania gameplay. So definitely be interested in scratching this one off my backlog, as it does seem pretty fun. This here is Pokemon, which I'm sure to no surprise, this is a game that felt they needed to be on this list just because of how popular Pokemon is. And, this is another series that I'm not too familiar with. And honestly, I don't have too much interest to really go through these games. But it feels like something I probably would have gotten into if I got into the series when I was a kid. But I'm well aware of how popular the series is. And, it's still going very strong to this day. So I had it included on this list as I feel like, regardless, it seems like just one of the more must-play games on this console. And so there were several of them. So the one that I'm showing here is for Pokemon Yellow. Metroid 2 Return of Samus was another game that I feel is at least worth a look. And so this is a sequel to the original Nintendo game. So there's a bit of a misconception that Super Metroid was part 2, but in reality that was part 3. This one here is part 2. And from what I played of it, it seems a pretty okay game. It doesn't seem like it's aged the best, but it is Metroid, so I did want to include it on here just because I love the series so much. And in this one here, you're on a mission to basically exterminate the Metroids on this planet. And an interesting concept that is just hindered a little bit by the technology and the console that it's on, but still I feel it's worth a look. Next up is Gargoyle's Quest. So this game seems to be set in the Ghouls and Ghosts universe, where you control this gargoyle character, which seems to be Firebrand from the Ghosts and Goblins and Ghouls and Ghosts games. And from what I played of it, it seems like a fun little platformer, and the gargoyle definitely makes for an interesting but fun protagonist to control. This here is actually, I'm going to lump in two games together, and that's The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons and also The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages. And basically, these were two more top-down Zelda games, but these were created by or developed by Capcom, and it sort of took the Pokemon approach, where they came out with two games at the same time that sort of play off of each other. Where one is theme has its theme is of seasons, and the other one of ages. Both of them seem to be really well done, and so this is two games that I definitely want to play through to scratch off the Zelda backlog that I have. This game almost needs no introduction, but this is Tetris on the Game Boy. So this is a launch title for the original Game Boy, and to summarize my overall thoughts on this game, I'll just paraphrase what a Nintendo executive said back in the day. He basically said, if you want to sell Game Boys to kids, pack in a Mario game. If you want to sell Game Boys to everyone, pack in Tetris. And the rest was history. Enough said. But probably the best game that I have played on the Game Boy is Super Mario Land 2 6 Golden Coins. It takes the classic Mario formula and puts it into a really fun 2D platformer that is just a joy to play, just as much as pretty much any 2D Mario game on here, and definitely improved from the original Super Mario Land game that came out on the Game Boy, as this one improves overall in just its overall gameplay, just overall level structure and graphics and all, and certainly a must play on this fun little handheld system.